When the Pacific War erupted, the Japanese military believed they had built an unstoppable naval force. Their battleships were legendary, their aircraft carriers dominated the waters, and their experienced sailors ruled the seas. But there was one American weapon they never saw coming: small, fast, and deadly. These were the PT boats, and they would become the terror of the night. Today we're exploring one of World War II's most fascinating stories: how a fleet of wooden speedboats, armed with just a handful of Americans, turned the tide of naval warfare and left Japanese commanders absolutely shocked. These weren't massive warships. They were barely 98 feet long, yet they managed to sink enemy vessels, protect American convoys, and strike from the shadows in ways that completely changed naval tactics forever. If you love history, incredible wartime stories, and learning about the innovations that won wars, you're in for a treat. So stick around as we dive deep into the legendary history of America's PT boats. To understand how revolutionary the PT boat was, we need to go back to the late 1930s. The U.S. Navy was facing a problem. How do you conduct fast reconnaissance and close-in attacks without building massive, expensive destroyers? The answer came from an unlikely place: a luxury yacht designer named Peter Hewitt and a British company called Vosper. The Americans took these designs and perfected them, creating the Elco PT boat. These vessels were marvels of engineering for their time. Powered by three massive Packard engines, a single PT boat could reach speeds of over 40 knots. That's 46 miles per hour on the open ocean. To put that in perspective, most destroyers of the era could only manage 35 knots. This speed was revolutionary. It meant American PT boats could engage the enemy and retreat before any meaningful response could be mounted. The boats were constructed primarily from mahogany plywood, which made them lightweight and incredibly maneuverable. Each vessel carried a crew of about 13 sailors and Marines. What they lacked in armor, they made up for in speed, firepower, and tactical brilliance. Armed with torpedoes, machine guns, and cannon fire, these small craft packed a punch that belied their size. The engineering behind these boats was stunning. The lightweight construction, combined with those Packard engines, created a vessel that could accelerate from 0 to 40 knots in mere seconds. American sailors quickly learned to use this advantage, darting in and out of enemy formations like lethal mosquitoes. When American forces began their island-hopping campaign across the Pacific, the PT boats found their perfect role. The waters between the Japanese-held islands became known as the Slot, and it was here that these wooden boats would make their name. Night after night, PT boats would race through these narrow passages, hunting for Japanese supply convoys and warships. The Japanese called this role Tokyo Express, or Rat Run, because it was typically done under cover of darkness. But the Americans turned the tables. Instead of just defending against Japanese night attacks, PT boats became the hunters themselves. They would lie in wait, engines silent, and then strike with devastating speed and accuracy. One of the most shocking aspects for the Japanese was how Americans used these boats tactically. Traditional naval warfare relied on battleships and carriers clashing in massive engagements. The PT boats introduced a completely new concept: fast, coordinated attacks by multiple small vessels against larger enemies. The Japanese military, steeped in traditional naval doctrine, struggled to adapt to this unconventional threat. Japanese admirals who had studied naval warfare their entire careers suddenly found themselves facing tactics that didn't fit into any established playbook. The speed, the unpredictability, the coordination, it was like nothing they had encountered before. During the Solomon Islands campaign, PT boats scored remarkable victories. In August 1943, PT-109, a boat under the command of a young Navy officer named John F. Kennedy, was famously rammed and sunk by a Japanese destroyer. Though Kennedy's crew survived, the incident demonstrated how even the fastest, most agile boats faced incredible danger. But PT boats also achieved stunning successes. In one particularly famous engagement, a single PT boat managed to sink or heavily damage multiple Japanese vessels. These victories shocked military planners in Tokyo. How could small, seemingly fragile wooden boats outmaneuver, outposition, and outfight much larger naval vessels? The answer lay in superior American tactics, innovative crew training, and the sheer audacity of commanders willing to take risks. PT boat captains, many of them young and aggressive, operated with a level of independence rarely seen in military operations. They knew the waters, understood their vessel's capabilities intimately, and weren't afraid to push those limits to the absolute maximum. These men became legends in the Pacific Fleet. They developed new tactics on the fly, communicated through innovative radio signals, and coordinated their attacks with the precision of experienced fighter pilots. American military leadership recognized the value of these boats and their crews and gave them significant operational freedom, something the rigid Japanese military structure could rarely match. The Japanese military found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't easily counter. Traditional anti-ship weapons were designed for slow-moving targets they could track and target from a distance. PT boats appeared suddenly, struck hard, and disappeared into the darkness before Japanese gunners could properly respond. Japanese naval commanders instituted special patrols and tactics to counter the PT boats, but with limited success. The boats were simply too fast, too unpredictable, and too well piloted. Japanese pilots couldn't catch them in daylight, and their ships couldn't target them at night. It was a tactical nightmare for an enemy used to massive ships and predictable engagement patterns. This shock value cannot be overstated. PT boats became legendary among Japanese sailors. Stories spread about the incredible speed and firepower of these small American vessels. The psychological impact was nearly as significant as the tactical impact. Men who might otherwise have felt confident in their large warships now knew they could be vulnerable to a surprise attack from the sea at any moment. Japanese convoy commanders began taking precautions, devising new defensive formations, and operating with heightened anxiety. The presence of a few PT boats could delay or redirect entire supply missions. That's how effective the intimidation factor had become. By the war's end, PT boats had become integral to American naval strategy in the Pacific. Over 500 were built, and they conducted countless patrols, rescue missions, and combat operations. They transported soldiers, delivered supplies, gathered intelligence, and fought in direct combat with Japanese forces. The casual way these boats were employed, often with young, inexperienced sailors learning on the job, contrasted sharply with the meticulous planning of larger naval operations. Yet their impact was undeniable. PT boats proved that naval warfare could be transformed by innovation, speed, and tactical brilliance. They showed that bigger wasn't always better, and that sometimes the most effective weapon is the one your enemy never sees coming. The legacy of the PT boats extended far beyond World War II. They influenced naval design for decades to come. Modern navies around the world adopted similar concepts, developing fast attack craft based on the principles proven by these wooden speedboats. The tactics developed by PT boat commanders became part of naval doctrine. Military academies studied how these boats achieved so much with so little. In many ways, the PT boat revolution in the Pacific was as significant as the introduction of aircraft carriers or submarines. What's truly remarkable is how this story has faded from popular memory. Today, most people know about battleships, aircraft carriers, and massive naval battles, but few remember the brave men who commanded and crewed these small wooden boats. Few understand how a handful of PT boats could tie up Japanese resources, damage enemy vessels, and inject genuine fear into one of history's most formidable navies. These were ordinary American sailors doing extraordinary things, operating at the bleeding edge of naval technology and tactics during the most brutal conflict in human history. If you've enjoyed learning about this incredible chapter of World War II history, please hit that subscribe button. We release fascinating historical content every single week, diving deep into the stories that shaped our world. Your subscription helps us create more detailed historical documentaries and reach more people who love learning about the brave men and women who fought during this era. Leave a comment below telling us what you found most interesting about PT boats and let us know what other World War II stories you'd like us to explore. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss a new video. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.